My son and his wife humiliated me at the wedding. I said nothing, but they'll regret it forever. The air in Scottsdale that morning was dry and still, the kind of heat that doesn't sweat but presses down on your shoulders like a quiet weight. I arrived early, as requested. Bailey had sent a message the week before asking if I could help set up. She called it a small favor, a little thing. I took it as a gesture. Not of affection, perhaps, but of acknowledgement. That was enough. The venue was lovely. Cream linens fluttered in the breeze, rows of white chairs faced a floral arch, and the desert beyond burned gold beneath a clear sky. I wore navy, not too dark for joy, not too bright for age. The same dress I'd worn to my niece's christening years ago. Sensible heels. Hair pinned. I brought a small bag of safety pins and extra tissues, just in case. Things mothers bring. Bailey approached as I adjusted a crooked napkin. Her eyes scanned me, just briefly, and she smiled. "You look comfortable," she said. The pause before that last word lingered like humidity, despite the dry air. Then she moved on, pointing to a table with place cards. "Would you mind checking those?" I nodded, and she was already gone. I told myself not to read into it. Today was about Tyler. My boy. My son, whose tiny fists once curled around my finger, whose cries I once answered in the dark before he could form words. Tyler, who once told me I was the strongest woman he knew. Today, he was marrying. Beginning a new chapter. That's what I wanted to believe. Still, there was something in Bailey's tone. In the way she said comfortable. As if I were an old couch someone couldn't quite get rid of. I pressed the napkin flat, aligned it with the plate, and folded my hands. Sometimes, it's not the words that hurt. It's the quiet spaces between them. The ceremony was the kind people describe in soft, glossy words, picturesque, elegant, modern with a rustic flair. I stood when they asked us to, smiled when the photographer raised his camera, and clapped politely when the vows were exchanged. Tyler looked handsome, his shoulders set in that quiet way he had when he was nervous but hiding it. Bailey glowed. That's what everyone said, she glowed. I sat through the service with my hands folded in my lap, my bag resting on my knees, the sun catching on the clasp. No one asked me to speak. No one glanced my way. The photographer gestured once, and I started to rise, only to realize he was directing the bridesmaids. I sat back down. Adjusted my shawl. Later, at the reception hall, Bailey handed me a clipboard with a list of names and table numbers. "Help me double-check these," she said, already walking away. I traced the list with my finger, reading names I didn't recognize, families from her side, college friends, coworkers. I saw my name near the bottom. Just Karen, not even mother of the groom. I didn't think much of it then. A few minutes later, I offered to help with the centerpieces. "Oh, it's all been arranged," Bailey said brightly. "But thank you." She sounded like someone speaking to a distant relative at a reunion, cheerful, detached. Then she turned to one of her bridesmaids and whispered something that made them both laugh. I was close enough to hear the word emotional, followed by a quick glance in my direction. I stepped away. At dinner rehearsal, I lingered near the photographer, hoping someone might ask me to join for a photo with Tyler. He stood beside Bailey's father, both of them in crisp button-downs, their arms linked across each other's backs. The photographer took 3 shots before moving on. I hadn't been included. Later, I mentioned a small toast I'd prepared, just a few lines about Tyler's childhood, about the joy of watching him become a man. Bailey smiled tightly and said, "Let's keep things light, Karen. You get emotional sometimes." She laughed, as if she were easing the moment, and others joined in. I smiled too. I said nothing. Instead, I went outside. There was a patch of shade by the catering van, and I stood there, pretending to check my phone. I didn't cry. I didn't frown. But something inside me curled a little tighter. At dinner that evening, I was placed at a side table, next to a woman who'd flown in from North Carolina, a friend of Bailey's aunt. She was pleasant enough. Told me about her cats, her hip replacement, and how stunning the bride looked. I nodded. I sipped my water. I pushed the asparagus around my plate. Each time Tyler passed my table, I looked up. Once, he met my eye. He smiled, a quick, distracted thing, and turned away. The music began. People danced. Bailey twirled beneath chandeliers, her gown catching the light. Her friends filmed on their phones, laughing, shouting, hugging. Someone started a conga line. I stayed seated. A woman asked if I wanted to dance. I said no, thank you. My feet were tired. My heart, more so. Around dessert, I noticed the photographer circling again. I sat up straighter. Smoothed my skirt. He passed me twice without lifting his camera. Then he crouched to take a close-up of Bailey's cousin feeding cake to her boyfriend. It was around then I realized I hadn't spoken to Tyler in hours. The last time I remembered touching his arm was at the ceremony, when I fixed his boutonniere. He had thanked me. He hadn't looked at me. I waited for the moment, the one where he would find me, pull me into the crowd, introduce me to someone, say, "This is my mother." That moment never came. Instead, I remained at my table, unnoticed. A polite ghost, occupying a seat no one remembered assigning. And still, I told myself it was okay. This was their day. I was not the center. I didn't need to be seen. Not fully. Just, acknowledged. It was a small thing to hope for. Later that evening, I went to look for the seating chart. I wanted to take a photo of it, something to remember the day by, a small souvenir. I couldn't find my name. I scanned the board twice. Then a young woman with a clipboard approached. "Can I help you find your table?" "I'm Karen. Tyler's mom." She blinked. "Oh. 1 second." She disappeared behind the curtain leading toward the catering staff. A few moments later, Bailey came gliding out, holding the train of her dress with one hand and a champagne flute in the other. She saw me and smiled, wide, toothy, radiant. "So sorry," she said, almost laughing. "We had to rearrange some things last minute. Come with me." She led me across the hall, past the large family table where her parents sat, where Tyler laughed beside someone's toddler. I passed the DJ booth, the bar, the cake table. We reached the far wall. There was a folding chair next to a utility bin. A trash can on one side, a stack of unused linens on the other. "Here you go," she said, setting down the chair with a flourish. "Best seat in the house." I stood there. Still holding my clutch. Still smiling, faintly. Bailey leaned in. "Relax," she whispered. "It's just a joke. You take everything so seriously." Before I could speak, Tyler appeared. He wrapped an arm around Bailey and looked at me. "She showed you the seat," he grinned. "Pretty funny, right?" And just like that, something in me folded. Not loudly. Not suddenly. But like old parchment, crinkling at the edges. I nodded. "Yes," I said. "Very funny." Then I sat. I stayed in that chair for the rest of the reception. They didn't notice. But I did. The music throbbed behind me, a steady pulse of celebration that didn't quite reach my corner. I sat straight-backed, hands folded over my lap, my clutch resting like a paperweight. The folding chair wobbled slightly on one leg. From this distance, the table centerpieces looked like tiny explosions of lavender and cream, blurred by shadows. Someone had pushed a cart of empty glasses nearby, and the faint scent of sour lime and wilted greenery floated in the air. No one came to check on me. Bailey's mother raised her glass during a toast, her voice swelling with practiced cheer. She spoke of family, of legacy, of welcoming a new daughter into the circle of love. Tyler nodded along, his face soft in the golden light. When he laughed at one of the anecdotes, the sound was almost unfamiliar. I watched it all from my little corner, beside the bin where someone had thrown out half a plate of shrimp cocktail. No one meant for me to see that, the heap of discarded appetizers, the plastic cup with lipstick on the rim, but I did. I always saw what others looked past. A waitress passed by and offered me a refill. I declined. She looked at my chair, hesitated, then continued on. I don't know how long I sat like that, long enough for the band to switch sets, for the children to tire and the shoes to come off. I saw Bailey take the floor with her father again. They danced to an old jazz number, something with horns and a slow sway. People clapped. I didn't. Instead, I remembered. I remembered Marcus's birth, or rather, the announcement. It came fast. Too fast. 7 months after Tyler and Bailey met. They said he came early, but he was already a solid 8 pounds, healthy lungs, a full head of hair. The nurses cooed over him. Tyler had cried, overwhelmed. I held the baby, warm and heavy in my arms, and something, just something, had flickered. His eyes were a deep brown, his lashes long and curled. Tyler's eyes were sky blue. Mine were too. So were my mother's and her father's. I'd said nothing then. Why would I? Babies change. Eyes lighten. That's what they all said. Still, I remembered the faint tension in Bailey's body when I'd offered to change Marcus's diaper during that first hospital visit. The way she had gently, but firmly, declined. Now, from my chair beside the garbage, I thought of Marcus again. His features. His timing. And a name. Rico. I'd heard it once. Barely a whisper. Over the phone, late one night when I stayed over to help. Bailey had been in the hallway, her voice low. No, I can't talk now. Not after what we agreed. He's sleeping. We'll talk later, okay? I'd asked about it. She said it was an old work contact. Something about a startup she'd briefly joined in San Diego. I let it go. But sitting there now, I didn't feel tired. I felt still. Cold, like stone. The reception wore on. Eventually, people began to leave. I saw Bailey hugging guests near the front door. Tyler wasn't nearby. I stood slowly, my knees stiff. I smoothed my dress again, not because it helped, but because it gave my hands something to do. I made my way out without saying goodbye. No one noticed. The valet had already closed. I walked the short distance to my rental car under a violet sky. The desert air had cooled slightly. I drove in silence, the lights of Scottsdale stretching thin across the windshield. Back at the hotel, I slipped out of my dress and hung it carefully on the closet hook. I sat on the edge of the bed in my slip, feet bare, the night pressing in around me. I didn't cry. I didn't write in my journal. I didn't even call my sister, though I knew she'd want to hear about the day. Instead, I opened my laptop. Searched for names I barely remembered. Then I typed an email. Dear Ms. Klein, I was given your name by a former coworker. I'm hoping you still consult privately. I have some questions regarding paternity investigation. The reply came the next morning. Quick, professional. She asked me to call her directly. Marcia Klein sounded older than I expected, calm, measured. She used to work homicide. Now she did quiet work for quiet people. Background checks. Affairs. Family matters. I told her what I knew. The timeline. The name Rico. The photos I remembered seeing once, briefly, Bailey and a man in a backyard, his arm around her shoulders. I described him. Dark features. Confident. Not shy. She asked me if I had anything belonging to the baby. We'll need a sample, she said. Something recent. A spoon, a pacifier. Even a hairbrush. I didn't know yet how I would do that. But I said I'd try. That week, I stayed quiet. Tyler sent a message, thanks for coming. Hope you got home safe. I replied, of course. It was a beautiful day. Nothing more. But inside, the cold was growing. Then, the opportunity. Tyler invited me for dinner. He said Bailey wanted to make things right. Just the three of us. A family meal. He sounded cautious. Soft around the edges. I accepted. Brought my herb rolls. And a zipped freezer bag folded in my purse. Dinner was polite. Bailey played the gracious host, overcompensating in every gesture. She filled my water glass 3 times. Complimented my earrings. Let me feed Marcus from a small bowl of mashed peas. He chewed on a plastic spoon the entire time, gumming the handle, squealing softly. Bailey turned away for a moment, checking something on the stove. And I did it. Quietly. I dropped the spoon into the zippered bag and slipped it back into my purse. It was nothing. A second. A breath. But it was the first real thing I'd done for myself in years. 5 days later, the report came. I sat at my kitchen table, the envelope unopened in front of me. Marcia had called, but I let it go to voicemail. I needed to open it myself. Alone. The results were clear. DNA probability, 0%. Marcus was not Tyler's biological child. I stared at the number until it blurred. I thought I'd feel angry. Triumphant, maybe. I thought I'd want to scream, to tell Tyler, to make it right. But what I felt was quieter. I felt the shift, the slow, quiet breaking of something I had never wanted to question. Bailey hadn't just lied. She had built her life on it. She had married Tyler, borne him a son, folded herself into our family, all with that lie in place. And Tyler. Had he known? Could he have suspected? I closed the file slowly, placed it in a drawer. Then I stood up and turned off every light in the house, except the one over the stove. I slept with the report beside me, unopened again. Not because I needed to read it twice. But because I needed to know it hadn't vanished. 3 days passed before I called Tyler. I said I had something to drop off, a dish I'd borrowed, a thank you for dinner. He sounded distracted. Sure, Mom. We're home tonight. When I arrived, Bailey greeted me at the door with a brittle smile, Marcus balanced on her hip. He reached for me, giggling, and I took him, my arms instinctively adjusting to the familiar weight. He smelled like powdered soap and faintly of cinnamon, probably from something sticky he'd eaten earlier. Bailey stepped back to let me in, but her eyes stayed on me longer than necessary. Suspicious. Guarded. Inside, the house was dim. A scented candle burned low on the kitchen island. Something with vanilla and sage. Tyler was on the couch, typing something on his laptop. We made small talk. Nothing sharp. Nothing real. I handed over the Tupperware and asked how work was. Bailey responded more than he did, her voice quick and bright. Marcus toddled across the rug, his steps clumsy and brave. Tyler cheered him on. That's my boy, he said, beaming. And I thought, no. He's not. But I didn't say it. Not yet. I left early. Said I was tired. Thanked them for the visit. Bailey closed the door behind me with a short, perfunctory hug. Tyler didn't walk me out. I drove home in silence. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and opened the envelope again. The report was exact. Methodical. A swab from Marcus's spoon. Cross-referenced with a sample from a tissue Tyler had used once when he visited, something I'd saved without knowing why. 0 biological relation. I kept the file open beside a cup of cold tea. The truth was real now, not just a suspicion, not a cruel thought. It was printed, stamped, certified. Tyler was not Marcus's father. And Bailey had known. I thought then of the day of the wedding. Of that folding chair by the trash can. The giggles behind me. The eyes that never quite met mine. What a clean, efficient erasure. I wasn't meant to matter. Just as Tyler wasn't meant to question. But we both mattered now. The next time Bailey reached out, it was to invite me to a party. Marcus's first steps, a milestone, she said, worthy of a celebration. Both families were invited. I almost didn't go. But then I thought of Tyler. I thought of the way he looked at that little boy. I thought of how a lie, when left too long, becomes something worse than betrayal. It becomes a foundation. And a foundation built on a lie can collapse without warning. So I put on a quiet dress, dove gray, long sleeves, a soft hem, and I tucked the DNA report into a manila envelope. I also printed one photograph, Bailey with Rico Delgado, smiling in the sunlight, his hand resting openly on her stomach. The image had a date stamp. She was visibly pregnant. They hadn't even tried to hide it. Not really. They just counted on our silence. At the party, people milled around in soft shoes, sipping wine, nibbling cheeses I couldn't pronounce. Bailey wore a linen jumpsuit and an aggressive smile. Tyler looked tired, but glad to see me. He hugged me longer than usual. Marcus waddled into the room holding a foam ball. Everyone clapped when he let go and took 3 shaky steps toward a waiting cousin. Bailey raised her glass. To our boy, she said. I stood. Before we toast, I said quietly, I'd like to share something important. The room stilled, as rooms always do when an old woman interrupts the rhythm of polite joy. I opened the envelope and handed the paper to Tyler. This is something I should have told you sooner. I wanted you to see it yourself. He looked at the envelope, confused. Then he unfolded the sheet. His eyes moved down the page. Slowly. Then back up. He read it again. Dead silence. I pulled the photograph from my bag and laid it on the table beside him. This is Bailey, I said softly. And Rico Delgado. This was taken 6 weeks before she met you. Bailey's wine glass trembled in her hand. You had no right. Tyler didn't speak. He looked from the photo to Bailey. Then to Marcus. Then back to me. This is real? He asked. I nodded. Bailey lunged forward, voice rising. We were happy. He's your son in every way that matters. Tyler stepped back. No, he said. He's not. Bailey stared at him, stunned. You're really going to do this here? But he was already folding the paper. Already walking away. No shouting. No spectacle. Just silence. Heavy, final, absolute. I left before dessert. Walked out into the night and didn't look back. The weeks that followed felt slow and oddly muted, like the aftermath of a long storm. The kind where nothing is broken outright, but everything feels damp, unsettled. Tyler didn't call right away. I didn't expect him to. Instead, I moved through my days as I always had, laundry folded on Tuesdays, groceries on Fridays, watering the porch plants each morning. I returned the borrowed dish, wiped clean and wrapped in a linen towel. No note. The envelope with the DNA report stayed tucked into the side drawer of my desk, between the warranty for the microwave and a recipe I never used. I didn't need to look at it again. The facts didn't change. But knowing it was there made the silence easier. A neighbor waved to me from across the street one afternoon, asked if everything was all right. I said yes. She smiled, and that was enough for both of us. Then, about 2 months after the party, Tyler showed up. No call. Just his car pulling into my driveway around 6:30 p.m., the headlights cutting across the hedge. I opened the door before he could knock. He stood there in jeans and a sweatshirt, holding a grocery bag in one hand. Thought I'd bring dinner, he said, voice low. I stepped aside to let him in. He moved quietly through the house, like someone stepping into a place they weren't sure they still belonged. He set the bag on the counter, chicken salad, crusty rolls, a bottle of ginger ale. I didn't know what you had in the fridge, he said. I nodded. This is fine. We ate at the kitchen table, The way we used to when he was in high school and came home late from practice. He didn't say much at first. Neither did I. But there was no strain. Just quiet. Just the sound of forks against ceramic and the slow clink of ice in our glasses. Halfway through the meal, he spoke. "I'm sorry I didn't say anything. At the party." "You said enough," I replied. He nodded, eyes fixed on his plate. "She lied to me," he said after a while. "From the beginning." I didn't answer. There was nothing I could say he didn't already know. He set his fork down. "You knew something was wrong." "I think I did too. But I didn't want to see it." We sat with that. He leaned back in the chair. Looked older than he had in months. Not tired in the usual way. Just still. "She's gone," he said. "Moved back to her parents' house. They're not speaking to her either." "And Marcus?" "With Rico," he said. "They filed for joint custody. It's moving fast." He paused. "He's a good kid. Smart." He didn't finish. "He'll be okay," I said gently. Tyler nodded. Rubbed his face with both hands, then let them fall. "I didn't know how to come back from that," he said. "You just did," I said. After that, things shifted. He started coming by on Sundays. Sometimes he brought takeout. Sometimes he helped with small things, hanging a picture frame, fixing the porch light. We didn't talk about Bailey. Or Marcus. Or the wedding. We didn't need to. One afternoon, I found a box on my porch, a frame inside, and a photo I didn't recognize at first. It was a candid, from some picnic long ago. Tyler and I were sitting on a blanket. He had fallen asleep on my shoulder, mouth slightly open, face sun-warmed. I was looking down at him. There was something in my expression, not posed, not planned. Just a quiet kind of love. I set the photo on the mantel. I didn't need an apology. I didn't want one. All I ever wanted was to be seen. Not for what I could offer. Not for what I provided. Just seen. That was beginning to happen again. We weren't rebuilding anything. That word suggests a return, a reconstruction of what was. We were beginning something new. Smaller. Quieter. Honest. No grand gestures. No second chances wrapped in flowers or cards. Just shelves hung without being asked. Just warm bread pulled apart at the table. Just my son, sitting across from me, not needing to fill the silence. That was enough. It was everything. I didn't hear from Bailey for a long time. Not a text. Not a call. Not even one of those bland social media apologies that people like to perform when the silence becomes too sharp. But her shadow lingered. Friends who didn't know the full story asked after her. A cousin sent me a forwarded invite to a support group for women navigating separation and betrayal, led by someone with the same last name. I didn't ask questions. I didn't follow the trail. Then, last week, I got a voicemail. "Karen, it's Bailey," she said. Her voice sounded thin. Tired in that way people sound when the walls start closing in. "I made mistakes. But I miss everyone. Can we talk?" I let the message sit in my inbox for 4 days before deleting it. No reply. No return. She hadn't just lied. She hadn't just used Tyler. She'd invited me into her deception. Handed me a folding chair and placed it next to a trash can, smiling all the while. That wasn't a misstep. That was a message. And I'd heard it. So I let the silence grow thick again. Not as punishment, but as distance. As clarity. People often confuse silence with cruelty. But I've found it can be a gift. A boundary. A kind of shield you lift when the words that once mattered no longer hold weight. I thought of Marcus sometimes. Of his giggle. Of how he'd held my finger once when he was still in the bassinet, gripping it tightly like he knew it meant something. I wondered if he'd remember me. Probably not. But I remembered him. And memories are enough. They don't always have to become futures. One evening, Tyler came over with a stack of mail and a new pair of work gloves. "You still trimming that boxwood alone?" he asked. I nodded. "Keeps my hands busy." "I'll help," he said, already heading out back. We didn't talk much as we clipped the overgrown edges. The shears made a clean, dry sound, like thick paper being torn just right. He worked carefully, not rushing, not performing. Just helping. Afterwards, we sat on the back steps, sweat cooling, dusk setting in. "Can I ask you something?" he said, not looking at me. I nodded. "When did you first know?" I didn't pretend not to understand. "I didn't know," I said. "Not then. I felt something." "That's different." He nodded slowly, pulling a weed from between the step cracks. "I think I knew too," he admitted. "But once you start building something, you don't want to see the cracks." "That's human," I said. "I should have listened to you more," he said after a pause. "You didn't need to," I said. "You're listening now." That was the truth of it. We can't rewind people into better choices. We can only meet them where they land, if they make the effort to land in our direction. And he had. There's a sweetness to that kind of return. Not triumphant. Not even joyful. Just honest. Bailey never showed up again. No more messages. No more parties. Her name came up once in conversation. Someone mentioned she'd moved in with a cousin 2 towns over. Working at a small design firm. Tyler didn't react. The only thing he said was, "She lied to herself too." And I believed him. Because that's how these things happen. People build a version of their lives they can live inside. But lies, like shallow roots, don't survive storms. They loosen. They give way. And when they do, the people still standing, quietly, with hands scarred from pruning and mending, are the ones who always mattered. That winter, Tyler helped me repaint the living room. He picked the color. Pale spruce. Light enough to reflect the sun, warm enough not to fade. We painted in silence, music playing low. He used long, even strokes. I covered the corners. When we finished, he stepped back and smiled. "Looks like a new place." I looked around. It didn't. It looked like mine. But now it also looked like someone had cared enough to leave a mark in it. The first time I saw Rico was by accident. It was at the grocery store just outside of Scottsdale, the one with the stone facade and the rows of succulents lining the entrance. I was pushing my cart toward the exit when a man passed me, holding a small boy's hand. Marcus. He wore a red hoodie and mismatched socks. His hair was longer now, curls soft at the edges, and he was clutching a juice box like it was treasure. He looked up at the man beside him, laughing at something I didn't hear. Rico bent down and wiped something from Marcus's chin, then tapped his nose gently. It was a father's gesture. Natural. Familiar. He didn't see me. Neither did Marcus. I didn't stop walking. I made it to the car, placed my bags in the trunk, and sat behind the wheel for a long time. Engine off. Windows cracked just enough to let the dry air in. I felt something then I couldn't quite name. It wasn't jealousy. Or anger. It was something quieter. The ache of a truth confirmed not by paper or test results, but by love. Whatever Rico had done in the past, whatever choices Bailey had made, Marcus was where he belonged now. And I, too, was where I belonged, on the outside, watching quietly, not interfering. That had become a kind of peace for me. I didn't tell Tyler I'd seen them. Some things don't need to be revisited. Some answers only open old wounds. Instead, I focused on what was still mine to tend. The house. The garden. The letters from my sister in Michigan. The way Tyler now came over most Sundays, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with nothing but stories about his week. One evening, he brought a bag of light bulbs. "I thought your hallway felt dim," he said. We stood on stools, replacing fixtures. At one point, I held the base while he twisted in the new bulb. Our hands brushed. He looked at me and smiled, not wide, just enough. It felt like forgiveness. Another Sunday, he showed up with a pan of lasagna. "Don't get excited," he said. "Bailey taught me the recipe. But I think I made it better." I didn't ask why he'd made it. I just set the table, poured 2 glasses of iced tea, and listened as he told me about his new job, project manager at a contracting firm. "They actually listen when I talk," he said. "Feels strange." "You were always a quiet leader," I said. He shrugged. "Maybe I forgot that for a while." We didn't speak of Marcus. Or the house he once bought. Or the ceremony with the folding chair. That belonged to another version of him. Of us. One he'd stepped away from. One I had too. Later that evening, he helped me carry a box of old books to the garage. As he lifted it, a photograph slipped out, one of the few I'd kept from the wedding. Bailey and Tyler, posing on the hill. Smiling. Radiant. I picked it up, stared for a moment, then placed it face down on a shelf. "You want me to toss it?" he asked. "No," I said. "Let it be." It wasn't bitterness. Just a quiet acceptance. That moment had happened. So had the pain. But both had passed. That night, as he left, he paused on the porch. "Thank you," he said. "For everything. Even when I didn't deserve it." I didn't say anything back. I just reached for his arm, squeezed gently, then let go. He walked to his car, waving once before backing out. The taillights glowed red and then disappeared down the street. I stood on the porch for a while. The wind had picked up, rattling the low branches of the lemon tree. A few petals had scattered onto the welcome mat. I swept them into a small pile. Not because they bothered me, but because it felt good to do something gentle, something that returned the world to its place. Inside, the clock ticked steadily. I made tea. Sat by the window. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. Bailey had tried to humiliate me, to isolate me, to place me in a corner she believed I wouldn't rise from. But what she didn't understand, what Tyler eventually did, was that some women don't fight with fists or rage. We simply endure. We wait. And when the noise fades, we're still there. Upright. Clear-eyed. Holding the pieces others thought we'd drop. The seasons changed gently in Arizona, not with the drama of snowfall or storms, but with a shift in the way the air moved. A cooler wind at dusk. A longer shadow beneath the porch. The lemon tree lost some of its leaves. The garden went from hopeful to dormant without much fuss. It was around this time that I began sleeping with the window slightly open again. The quiet didn't scare me anymore. It had become something I welcomed, like an old friend who sits beside you without speaking, asking nothing, offering only company. Tyler kept coming by. Never on a schedule, never with explanation. Sometimes he just stood in the doorway and asked, "You got coffee?" Sometimes he didn't even ask, just walked to the cupboard and poured a mug before sitting down across from me. We rarely spoke about the past. I never asked what he remembered. He never asked what I knew. Our silence wasn't avoidance. It was care. A way of not reopening things that no longer needed examination. One afternoon, he brought me a small box. "It's nothing," he said. "Just found it when I was sorting old stuff." Inside was a photo I hadn't seen in years, him at 6 years old, standing in our backyard with a colander on his head, holding a spatula like a sword. I'd written on the back in faded pen, "Captain Tyler, Defender of the Garden, July 1994. I smiled. "You kept this?" "I found it in an old wallet. Thought you might want it back." I placed the photo on the refrigerator door with a magnet shaped like a pear. After he left, I looked at it for a long time. That little boy had never really disappeared. He had just gotten quieter. I started writing again, not stories, but lists. Thoughts I couldn't say out loud. Things I needed to remember. I kept a small notebook beside the bed. Some entries were single lines. Don't trust the smile if the eyes don't follow. You don't need to be invited to matter. Others were longer. Memory fragments. A recipe I used to make on cold nights when Tyler had the flu. The sound of his laugh when he used to pretend the hallway rug was a pirate ship. None of it was sentimental. Just grounding. That's how healing looked for me, not dramatic, not visible. Just the quiet return of things I'd set aside. I went back to the community center one morning. Took a watercolor class. I hadn't painted since my 20s. The instructor was kind, if a little too loud. She had everyone paint lemons. Mine turned out pale and uneven, but I didn't care. It felt good to move color across paper again. The next Sunday, I showed it to Tyler. He looked at it for a long time. "This yours?" he asked. I nodded. He tapped the corner. "I like this part," he said, pointing to the shadow under the fruit. "Why?" "It feels honest," he said. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. He stayed for dinner that night. Helped with dishes. Sat on the porch while I watered the potted plants. The silence between us felt full, not like something missing, but like something mended. Later that week, I received a letter in the mail. The envelope was unmarked. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, torn at the edges. The handwriting was unmistakably Bailey's. It read, "I thought I could make it work. I thought I could be enough. But lies don't hold people together. I'm sorry." No greeting. No sign-off. No address. I folded the letter once, neatly, and slid it into the back of my notebook. Not to hold on. Just to know it was there. Some truths don't need acknowledgement. They only need to be known. I didn't tell Tyler about the letter. Maybe one day I will. Maybe not. There's a kind of mercy in silence too, not to conceal, but to protect what little peace we've built. That week, the sky turned a gentler blue. The garden sprouted one late bloom. I started sleeping better. Tyler brought me a wind chime shaped like a crescent moon. We hung it together by the back door. It clinked quietly in the breeze, almost too soft to notice. But I noticed. And that was enough. It was a Tuesday morning when the past tried to return. I was making oatmeal, standing by the stove with the radio on low, classical music, something gentle. The sun came in through the blinds in streaks. My slippers made a soft hiss against the tile floor. The phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. When I checked it later, the voice was unmistakable. "Karen, please." Bailey's voice was shaky, uneven. "I know I hurt you. I hurt everyone. But I'm trying to fix things. I miss Tyler. I miss our life. Marcus misses you." She paused, as if waiting for me to speak, then added, "Please, call me." I stood there holding the phone, letting the silence after her voice stretch into the room. A part of me had expected this, not the timing, not the words, but the tone. The worn-down quality of someone who'd finally run out of places to hide. I deleted the message. Not out of anger. Out of completion. She had told her lie. Built her life with it. Watched it collapse. And now she wanted someone to hand her a new beginning. Someone who used to answer the phone without hesitation. Someone she'd once led by the elbow to a folding chair beside a trash can. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I didn't need her apology. I didn't even need her recognition. What she'd broken wasn't just a marriage. It wasn't just my trust. It was something smaller and harder to name, the space I used to occupy in my own family's story. She hadn't just taken it away. she had rewritten it. Now, she wanted to pull me back in, to let me play a quieter role again, a safer one. The forgiving one. The woman who folds napkins, who says it's all right, dear, while others take their turns wounding. But I had stopped folding napkins for people who handed me crumbs. I turned the stove off. Let the oatmeal cool. Sat at the table and stared out at the lemon tree, the leaves rustling softly in the morning air. That evening, Tyler stopped by. He didn't bring food this time. Just himself. He leaned against the doorframe and said, "She called me too." I didn't ask what she said. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and placed it on the counter. "She sent a photo of Marcus," he said. "With a note. Said he's asking for me." I looked at the paper. A child with soft curls. Holding a toy dinosaur. His eyes were still brown. Still unfamiliar. "Are you going to see him?" I asked. Tyler sat at the table across from me. "I don't know," he said. "Sometimes I think maybe I should. And other times. I remember how it felt. To be lied to. To believe something with my whole heart and have it yanked away." I said nothing. "I loved him like my own," he said after a while. "I know," I said. He rubbed his palms together, stared down at the table. "But loving him doesn't mean I have to go back," he said finally. "No," I said. "It doesn't." We sat together in the kitchen while the light outside dimmed, turning the edges of the room gold. After a while, he stood. "I just wanted you to know," he said. "That I'm okay. That I'm not falling apart." "I never thought you were," I said. He smiled faintly. Kissed the top of my head. Left without another word. The next day, I received a letter. This time, not from Bailey. From a law office I didn't recognize. Inside was a single-page notice, an application for Rico Delgado to receive full custody of Marcus. It listed Bailey as the respondent. A note at the bottom indicated a pending hearing date. I didn't forward it. I didn't mention it. That part of the story wasn't mine anymore. Tyler came by less frequently after that, but when he did, it was without the heaviness he used to carry. He told me about his job, about a co-worker who made terrible coffee, about a dog he saw at the park that reminded him of the one we used to have. He smiled more. He asked about my garden. One afternoon, he helped me move a bookshelf. As we shifted it from the wall, a stack of old photo albums fell. He bent down, picked one up. "Your wedding," he said, flipping it open. "You were young." "So were we all," I said. He held a photo of James, my late husband, looking straight at the camera with one arm around me. "You think he'd be proud of me?" Tyler asked. "I know he would," I said. That evening, after Tyler left, I sat in the armchair and watched the light fade from the room. I held that same album on my lap, but didn't open it. Some memories don't need to be re-seen to be remembered. They live in the quiet. They live in who we become after. There's a photo I keep on my nightstand now. Not of Tyler, or James, or even Marcus. It's one I took myself, a blurry shot of my backyard just after sunrise. The lemon tree in shadow, the sky bruised blue and gold. The garden still asleep. Nothing extraordinary. But I remember the moment I took it. I remember standing barefoot on the cool tile, the door open behind me, the air still unspoiled by the day. Peace doesn't come all at once. It comes in fragments. A room you no longer enter because it no longer belongs to the version of you who once stood there. A folded dress you never plan to wear again. A voice on the phone you choose not to return. Tyler still visits, though less often. The rhythm of our lives has settled. No longer anchored by apology or the need to repair. Just, continued. He called last Thursday. "Do you need anything from the store?" "No," I said. "But thank you." He paused. "I might swing by anyway. Just felt like checking in." I told him the porch light had burned out. That was enough to bring him. We sat together outside as the sun dipped low. He didn't stay long. But when he left, he placed his hand over mine for a moment. Not hurried. Not rehearsed. "I'm glad we're okay," he said. I smiled. "We're more than okay," I said. The porch light glowed behind him as he walked down the path. I watched until his car turned the corner and disappeared. Inside, I made tea. The same ceramic mug I'd used for years, chipped at the rim, but still serviceable. I sat by the window and watched the wind stir the branches. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, then fell silent again. This is how life is now. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just mine. Bailey never called again. I heard she moved to a smaller town. Someone told me she started over, new name, new job. That's her path now. One I no longer walk beside. As for Marcus, I sometimes see photos in passing, through a friend of a friend, an article shared online, a birthday post someone forgot to make private. He's growing. Strong, curious, bright. He will have his own questions one day. If he ever comes looking, he will find me not bitter. Not waiting. But whole. Because that's what I became. Not in spite of what was taken from me, but because I stopped asking others to return it. People think silence is weakness. That not raising your voice means surrender. But silence is where I found myself again. In every quiet morning. In every unopened door. In every moment I chose not to argue with a version of myself that no longer existed. They placed me by a trash can and called it a joke. I stood up without a word. And I never sat back down.